Hi there, Keith. We've been talking about this all morning and some of the afternoon. There's 400-pager from the ACCC. David Littleproud says it's not enough. He wants a strong deterrent. We have Richo on the show. He says, basically, what can you do? What do you think?
Well, I don't think we can just put it on the shelf and ignore it. It's actually 441 pages. So the first thing we should do is to study that report. And no one's going to do that by lunch. No, no one could. I like to think I read fast, but not that fast. So we will study that in detail, and I certainly will. But let's go back to the practical reality that Australians are facing. If you go to any supermarket in Australia, and most of the 70% are Coles and Woolworths, you have seen in this term of government milk go up by 18%, bread up by 25%, and eggs by 35%. That's why food banks have queues through the roof. That's why many families are not having enough food on the table and are going to sleep hungry. So this isn't an academic exercise on oligopoly or monopoly power. It actually affects the daily lives of Australians. So we owe it to them to study it properly and to make sure we leave no stone unturned, and the Coalition won't.
But Liberal, which has had this business-friendly image for years, you're not likely to force breakups, are you?
We're in favour of competition. That is what is important to a free market economy, that we have proper competition. And in any sector where you've got two players with almost 70% of market power, of course we should look closely at whether there's any abuse of that power. And within that report, and the parts that I have read, there are areas to look at. And particularly if you go to a regional town where there isn't the obvious market within that area for competition like you would see in Melbourne or Sydney, then there are examples of whether land banking has occurred or where particular suppliers aren't given the actual preference that a big supplier would. We've got to constantly look at that and make sure that Australians are getting value for money. That is entirely consistent with liberal values and a free market economy.
But this multi-pronged approach is, in essence, I think Labor and the ACCC would say, is what they're doing.
Well, then they're not doing a great job. I just quoted the actual prices that Australians are facing. And it's not just on market policy or supermarkets. Let's look at the inputs. If you are trying to start a small or a medium competitor to the big two, well, then look at the barriers to entry that you have in terms of red tape, in terms of industrial relations laws in any supermarket. Employing casuals is a really big contributing factor. And at the moment, I hear from businesses that they're saying they've given up on employing casuals because their laws have changed so much that it is just too hard. So Labor keeps putting barriers to entry. And if you want to say, well, who is the friend of big business versus consumers? Well, then that's where Labor is at the moment. So they talk a tough game on looking after consumers, but you've got to judge them on their actions, and they've been found wanting.
Speaking of the word tough, we had Victoria Parliament pass tough or not specifically tough bail laws overnight. Is that going to have a meaningful impact on youth crime, do you think?
This is a serious issue. Of course, it's a state issue, but it's raised with me all the time on door knocking or in phone canvassing calls. And we had the police did a brief here in Manningham, which is a government area that covers most of Menzies. And they did note that youth crime has had monumental increases year on year. And the reason being is because in Victoria, if you are under 18, there has been a presumption that you get bail every time. Now, that is well intended. No one wants to see young people in prisons which are criminal schools. I get that. I get that. But what it has done, it has incentivised organised crime to seek out young people to commit the crimes because they see it as consequence-free. That's not helping young people. It's not helping the victims. So this state Labor government was dragged kicking and screaming. But then when you look at the detail, look past the heading of the tough new bail laws, there's nothing tough about it at all. Nothing tough about it at all. It's weaker than it was before they made those reforms. So let's watch the crime stats. I hope they decrease, but when I've looked at the detail of that law, I don't think they will.
We seem to be having some audio issues, but great to talk to you as always, and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
All right, thank
Keith Wolahan, Liberal MP for Menzies.